He could barely remain upright without his crutches. A man once dreaded by thousands now shook, standing only moments from his own execution. But who was he and what had led him here? His name was Petro Caruso. Once the powerful police chief of Rome during the Nazi occupation, he did more than follow orders. He embraced them. He became the Germans' iron enforcer, hunting partisans, imprisoning civilians and sending countless Jews to their deaths. Caruso ruled through terror, cruelty and unquestioning loyalty. He believed the war would never end, that his authority would last forever. History proved him wrong. In March 1944, after a partisan attack on German forces, the Nazis demanded retaliation, 1 Italian life for every German killed. Caruso personally helped select 335 names. Ordinary citizens were dragged from their homes and executed in the Ardeatine caves, their bodies sealed beneath rock in silence. When Rome was liberated, his reign of fear collapsed overnight. He was arrested, placed on trial for war crimes and sentenced to death. On September 22, 1944, Petro Caruso, frail and leaning on his crutches, was brought before a firing squad. The people who once spoke his name in whispers now stood quietly as he faced the same fate he had imposed on so many others. The gunshots rang out across Rome. This is a part 2 to our ongoing series. Check out part 1 if you haven't seen it. Franz Straser was a member of the Waffen-SS. He served as a guard and camp functionary at the Mauthausen concentration camp in Nazi-occupied Austria during the Second World War. In December 1945, he was executed by hanging at Landsberg prison for crimes committed at the camp. Straser was neither a physician nor a high-ranking administrator. Yet within the camp hierarchy, even mid-level guards held enormous power. He enforced discipline and supported the daily routines that led to countless deaths. He was also present during selections and collective punishments. According to survivor accounts, after the war ended in 1945, Straser was arrested by United States forces. Former prisoners identified him during the camp's liberation, and he was taken into custody. He was later charged with war crimes and brought before the United States Military Tribunal in the Mauthausen camp case held in Dachau. The proceedings prosecuted more than 60 individuals connected to the camp system, and Straser was among them. During the trial, several former inmates pointed him out and described his brutality in detail. The court determined that Straser had taken part in a system of organized abuse and murder. Although he was not among the highest-ranking staff, his conduct matched that of those who enabled the camp's daily violence. He was found guilty and sentenced to death by hanging. His execution took place on December 10, 1945, at Landsberg prison in Germany. He was one of several war criminals put to death that day. The executions were filmed by the United States military and preserved as part of the historical record. Franz Straser went from SS camp guard to convicted war criminal in less than 2 years. The question remains, was justice served or has more yet to be done to fully expose the scope of the Nazi camp system? Kurt Bruns became the first Nazi officer executed by United States forces. A German army captain, he served with the 18th Volksgrenadier Division during the Second World War. By late 1944 he was deployed in western Germany during the Battle of the Bulge. In December of that year, his unit captured roughly 300 American prisoners of war near the town of Blyaf. Among them were 2 U.S. soldiers of Jewish-German background, Richard Jacobs and Murray Zappler. Both were trained military intelligence specialists and fluent in German. During interrogation, Bruns learned of their Jewish identity. Rather than treating them as prisoners under the laws of war, he issued a chilling command. He declared that Jews had no right to live and ordered his men to kill the 2 soldiers. The Americans were lined up and executed by a firing squad acting under Bruns's authority. This was a calculated war crime driven by ideology. Another captured American who witnessed the killings later reported what had happened. His account was taken seriously, and within weeks United States forces began searching for Bruns. He was captured in February 1945 and placed under arrest. Unlike many others, Bruns was not held until the war's end. The U.S. military chose to prosecute him immediately. He was charged with war crimes for the unlawful execution of American prisoners. During the trial, several witnesses confirmed his role. Bruns tried to defend himself by claiming he had followed orders and that the soldiers were spies. The court rejected this argument. The victims had been in uniform and there was no legal justification for their deaths. He was found guilty and sentenced to death by firing squad. This method of execution was unusual. Most Nazi war criminals were hanged, but Bruns was among the few put to death by shooting because of the nature and timing of his crime. The sentence was carried out on June 15, 1945, at a gravel pit in Densdorf, Germany. Bruns stood calmly before the firing squad, wearing part of his uniform. No final statement was recorded. Afterward, his body was placed in a plain wooden coffin. On December 10, 1945, Wilhelm Wagner walked toward the gallows with a smile on his face. He did not hesitate. He showed no fear. If anything, he appeared entertained, like a man approaching a punchline rather than his own death. But for those who survived his cruelty, there was nothing amusing about him. They remembered Wagner as a sadist in uniform, and justice was finally catching up. Wagner had been a member of the SS Totenkopfverband, the Death's Head unit responsible for running Nazi concentration camps. He was stationed at Dachau, one of the earliest and most notorious camps in the Reich's killing network. There he served first as a guard and later took charge of daily operations within certain prisoner blocks. His actions were no secret. Multiple survivors testified that Wagner took pleasure in violence. He beat inmates for sport, arranged humiliations, and mocked prisoners as they were led away for punishment. He laughed when we cried, one survivor recalled. Others said he joked while people were dying. Some remembered how he called starving inmates skeleton actors, and forced them to perform for scraps of food. After Dachau was liberated by United States forces in April 1945, investigators found Wagner's name in SS personnel records. He was captured within weeks while hiding among retreating German troops. At first he claimed to be a low-ranking clerk. But former Dachau prisoners quickly identified him, not by title but by conduct. He smiled when he heard us, they said. We never forgot that smile. At the Dachau trials, Wagner stood out not because of his defense, which was weak and predictable, but because of his behavior. He showed no remorse. He laughed during testimony. When photographs of abused prisoners were presented in court, he reportedly smirked. One American officer later described him as the most openly arrogant defendant in the entire courtroom. Prosecutors introduced extensive evidence, including signed labor schedules, punishment orders, and first-hand accounts of physical torture. Wagner was linked to the deaths of at least 60 prisoners, either directly through beatings or indirectly by denying medical care. He did not kill with a weapon, the prosecutor said. He killed through routine. When the guilty verdict was announced, Wagner stood straight and nodded. He refused to appeal. In fact, he asked to be executed as soon as possible, stating that he had no regrets. I did my duty, he said, and I did it well. Those present were stunned, not by the words themselves, but by how casually he delivered them. On the morning of his execution, Wagner showed no fear. He stood upright, hands steady, face blank. As the noose was drawn tight around his neck, he smiled slowly and deliberately. No last words. No apology. He was known as the Butcher of Birkenau. Otto Moll oversaw the crematoria at Birkenau, the deadliest section of Auschwitz. Born in 1915 in Hesse, Germany, Moll joined the SS in his early 20s. After losing an eye in an accident, he was assigned to the concentration camp system. First posted at Sachsenhausen, he eventually made his way to Auschwitz, rising through the ranks from guard to head of crematoria operations in Birkenau. By 1943, Moll managed the cremation pits and gas chamber logistics at the height of mass exterminations. The sheer number of dead became overwhelming. When the crematoria could not keep up, he organized open-air burnings, digging massive trenches, pouring fuel, and setting them alight. Survivor accounts indicate he often participated personally, sometimes even before victims were fully unconscious. He was not a faceless cog in the machinery of death. Prisoners remembered his face, his voice, and his casual cruelty. Testimonies described him beating and shooting prisoners without cause, tossing children into flames without hesitation, moving through death as if it were ordinary work. In early 1945, as Soviet forces advanced, the SS evacuated the camps. Moll led several death marches, forcing thousands of sick and starving prisoners through snow. He was seen shooting anyone who collapsed, leaving bodies along frozen roads like discarded objects. After Germany surrendered, Moll was captured by American forces. Initially he denied everything, but survivor testimonies and matched records exposed the truth. He was tried by the Dachau Military Tribunal, charged with war crimes and crimes against humanity. At trial he showed no emotion. Witnesses described in vivid detail how he executed prisoners, burned victims alive, and treated mass death as routine. His defense was weak. He admitted his role but claimed he was following orders. The court was unconvinced. Moll was sentenced to death. On May 28, 1946 at Landsberg prison, Otto Moll was hanged. There were no final words, no remorse, just the drop in silence. The man who once commanded the edge of burning pits finally faced the consequences of his crimes.